Riding on the successes of earlier generations, today many Indians are migrating to other countries to build their careers and lives. Such migrations are imbued in general with challenges of inclusion, understanding, and acceptance, and in specific when the situation involves a cross cultural interfaith marriage. What role does forgiveness, reconciliation, and love play in such situations? What if there is a child born from this wedlock? How does one raise such a child where it feels protected and cared for? How does a man tame his assertive, aggressive masculinity to acknowledge and embody his sensitive and nurturant femininity, especially in the context of leadership roles? How does a man balance his need to become with his need to be? What does it mean to be a successful man in a world full of opportunities that promise abundant fame and fortune? To explore these questions and more, I am in conversation with Nachiket Torwekar, a technology leader, angel investor, and advisor to startups currently based out of Portland, Oregon, in the US. Nachiket did his engineering in information technology from COEP Pune, MBA from Haas School of Business at University of California, Berkeley, and has nearly 2 decades of experience in the technology space, with sports and fitness being his second nature. Welcome, Nachiket, to this conversation.
Thank you, Milan, and it's a pleasure to be conversing with you again after decades.
Yes, I think when was this we met for the first time? 2005 or 6?
2005 is when we met for the first time.
You were a final year engineering student in the College of Engineering, Pune.
That's right. That's right. And you were running your first batch of the mentorship program, which I think went on to like several more batches.
Oh yes, you set it up. I mean, I guess I'm sure we'll discover more about what all you have ended up setting up in life. But yes, you set up our youth mentorship program that Asha and I started, I think, in 2005, and you being the first batch. And then we had about 17 batches thereafter. So we ran it for almost 17 years. But yeah, what a fun time we had together. At least, I don't know why and how and what got us in touch with each other, but I guess this was meant to be. And it has been a long, long gap since you moved to the US. But I'm so glad we are meeting and doing this today.
Yeah, I mean, when your pamphlet was distributed in the college hostel, most of our seniors advised us like, don't go for this internship program. They're just going to make you do some typewriting work and some office work. It is not going to be great. And then one of my friends, I mean, Sagar, you know him, he's like, Chal ke dekhte, let's see what is there. And then, three of us showed up and our life changed after that forever. So, sometimes it was like it was a risk that we took of like what we don't know what it is, but it seems like something good, and it panned out that way.
No, it did. It did. I'm actually been for a few days now looking at this theme of, let's say, midlife. Now, when I'm saying midlife, I'm assuming here a life expectancy of around 80 years in most parts of the world. Of course, in many parts with the healthcare and other systems being what they are, life expectancy can go into the 90s as well. But let's say globally, if I were to look at broadly 75 to 80 as the life expectancy, the late 30s, early 40s is, let's say, the half life.
Yep.
And it's an interesting phase because it's a phase where you have a rich experience of living, both, having passed the phases of childhood, young adulthood, manhood or womanhood, whatever it may be. And for many, it could even be transitioning into having a partner, could be, in marriage or otherwise. And maybe a kid or two. It's a very interesting phase where and I've gone through that many years back, and I'm kind of looking at it from a hindsight wisdom where it's an interesting phase, the late 30s, early 40s, in my view, is where you have a rich experience of living and enough energy and passion to look forward to, in another phase of life and living. And I am assuming that you are in that phase of life. Love to begin this conversation on the note of, what is the space you're finding yourself in today in your life?
Yeah, I mean, if 80 is the expectancy, I'm like smack down in the midlife then. So 40 coming up on that very, very soon. And I love how you phrased it. I love how you phrased it in terms of you've gotten enough life experience and yet you still have energy to take on big new things, take on big risks and big challenges. And I actually find myself somewhere exactly in that mind state right now. One of the big things is my son is now 1 year old, and I've been married for like 4 years, and the life transition from like a young professional who can move to any city and do anything, take on any role, to now, like, when you think about those things, you have to be like, and what about my wife's job? She's a physician, and if I move to a different country, for example, she might have to get recertified. And the kid is young, but like maybe in a couple of years, that also becomes a consideration. So those thoughts that never occurred to me before, they are definitely like a big part of like the thought process right now. In terms of like having gone through big life changes, like, moving to the United States at the age of 28. And unlike many of my friends, I did not move here for like Masters of Science. I moved here for a job. So I moved here knowing that I might not be able to make any friends. And then again, I did a big change where I moved out of the Bay Area to Portland, Oregon. But now I feel like I actually think about if I have to make a big change or if I have to make any decision, there are several different things that I need to think of.
I'm actually tempted to ask you something different here. The place where we live, the location or the city, knowingly or unknowingly influences many parts of our lives. I have grown up and lived much of my life in Mumbai city. But of course, now for the last 30 years, I live in Pune. And the city has grown on me and made me into a person which I wouldn't have been had I continued to live in Mumbai. So you just said a moment ago that you were in India for much of your 28 years of your life. And then for the last decade or a little more than that, you moved two places, the Bay Area in California, and now in this beautiful, beautiful city called Portland in Oregon, which I have been very fortunate to visit a couple of times. So let me ask you, how has living and growing in India for almost 28 years of your life, and then the last 10 years, or a little more than that, in two parts, and I'm seeing it in two segments, California and Oregon. How has all those three experiences added to you?
I think like even like taking one more step back, right? Like even in India, for me, growing up as a kid in Nagpur and then doing my engineering in Pune and then going to Bangalore for my first job, even just within that small ecosystem, those were very different worlds. Nagpur in the 90s was like a small town. And yeah, we had like all the infrastructure, but like it was still like a very middle class way of living and thinking, and you never spent a single rupee that you shouldn't be spending on anything like fancy or dining out, or buying a CD was out of the question, for example. Fast forward to Pune and engineering, there was, MG Road and there was FC Road and there were like, all these places where you can go and have a 40 rupees coffee. And it was very new. And then going to Bangalore, where it was like, new money, first job, and a pretty urban city with like access to like rock music and discotheques and, nightlife and all of that. So even within the journey of India, I think that each different place was very unique. And I would say, looking back, it literally feels like I was a different person when I was in Nagpur versus in Pune versus in Bangalore. The one thing that I would say like is constant within that journey was the willingness to like actually put myself out there and assume that I don't know anything. And by the way, if you ever go from Nagpur to Pune, the Punekars will make you feel that no problem. They will make you feel that you don't know anything.
But by the way,
uh,
Nachiket, sorry
yeah.
to butt in here. Despite me living in Pune for 30 years, I am still a Mumbaikar by heart and by mind.
There you go. There you go. Yes, yes. I think I love the Pune culture. It's like a lot of like leg pulling, but it's also it like the people like come together and lift you up. You are a great example of that. So I would say like the fact of like hey, I don't know much and there is so much more for me to learn. That's the mindset that I came in to the Bay Area, and Bay Area at that point of time, and this is like 2012. We had recovered the recession era and tech boom was like really booming. Cloud was picking up, multi-million dollar investments in like the cloud and like the future of digital transformation was being done. So it was just amazing time to be in the Bay Area. 2012 to 2016, like those 4 years, I think I experienced that life. I was a professional. I was also a student at the Haas School of Business at UC Berkeley through my evening and weekend MBA program, surrounded by phenomenal professionals who were also like in their late 20s or 30s. And so it was a great time. It was all about like the race, the leading edge, the making sure that you are everywhere that you need to be. You are on Twitter and Instagram and like everywhere, like the presence has to be felt. And then I think at some point around 2015, 2016, I was at the tail end of my business school and I had spent some time in the Bay Area. That's when, and I think this was 2016, so I was like around 32 years of age at that point of time. Some voice inside of me was like, I think I know who I am, and I think I need to slow down. And I think I need to find a place where maybe technology is not at the leading edge, but what the company is doing, they really, really do it well. And I want to be a part of like something much bigger where I can probably bring in some technology expertise. And that's how I came to Portland. And I was like, it was a very intentional choice of like slowing down and focusing on, hey, this is what I'm good at. Yes, the Nachi from Nagpur to Pune to Bangalore to Bay Area has always been in the mindset of I can learn more and I can do more. But the Nachi that moved from Bay Area to Portland was this guy who was saying, I think I know who I am. I think I know I love building teams. I want to be a part of something bigger than who I am. The joy of building software with a bunch of people together is what really, really drives me. And that's why I need to get to a place where I can really invest in the people. And it's not just about like hopping jobs every 2 years, which was very common in the Bay Area at that point of time. You get a job, you do the best work you do in 2 years, you put in the 18 hours a day, and then you move on to the next thing. Which is also great, which is like teaches you a lot of things. But I realized like that's not who I am. I like investing in people, and this role provided me that opportunity. So I guess like to answer your question, going back, I feel like yes, moving from different places has definitely taught me different things. But at the same time, I feel like you also grow older and you realize like how much of moving to a different place can you really take and for what?
So then if I were to invite you to look at it symbolically or pictorially, because I'm more an images person. If you were to give an image to Nachiket of India, Nachiket in the Bay Area in California, and the Nachiket of today in Portland, Oregon, Now, what are the three symbols or images that you see for these three Nachikets?
I would say that Nachiket in India would be like somebody like, trying to take, 3 runs really fast when the ball is approaching the boundary, just like really like optimizing every single like second. Uh, for people who don't watch cricket, think about like 100-meter dash and just trying to do your best to like run as fast as you can. Um, but the Nachi in the Bay Area, I would say, like, as I mentioned, I was a professional and a student, so it feels like somebody who's playing chess. Like I'm playing chess, and I'm trying to like optimize my resources. I'm trying to like do the best I can with what I think I have acknowledged are my resources, which are finite. I have acknowledged that also, and trying to do the best I can. And then Nachi in Portland, Oregon, is like somebody, somebody sitting, I would say, like, like a decent enough archer who's kind of gotten a good hang of his sport and can like, reliably hit the target. May not be the bullseye every single time, but he has that poise and the calm of knowing that I'm going to hit the target like 9 out of 10 times.
That to me sounds like a warrior in a Zen state.
I love that. Yeah, that's a great way to look at it.
But I want to kind of put this in the context of a seismic change that we all have gone through very recently in the form of the COVID pandemic. Uh, you know, a pandemic of that nature which just impacts every person on the planet, and not just every person, but every living and non-living thing as well. Probably a once in 100 year or 200-year phenomena. And you've walked the leadership journey before, through, and after this, pandemic phenomena. I'm wondering if
Yeah.
this event that has happened has impacted at the way you look at leadership. When I'm saying leadership, it's not just leading others, but leading oneself as well in various roles
Yes.
of life, whether a person in the family or person in the work organization, or the social structures that you are a part of, leadership in general. Now, how has this
But
pandemic impacted your notion of leadership?
that's a really amazing question, Milan. I think that this in itself could be like a whole
Yeah, yeah,
1 hour
indeed,
conversation.
indeed.
But I would love to, I'll start off by answering with the leading others part, and then I definitely want to touch upon like what does it mean to lead yourself? Like what does it mean to be a leader? Um, One story that I remember like very clearly from the early days of pandemic. I remember this one particular VP. He sent out an email after like his team had gone fully remote, celebrating the increase in velocity of development. And then there were a bunch of other people who kind of did that. Early days of pandemic, kind of like, oh, actually going remote is better, and you are actually doing more work and there are less distractions. So it was sort of like, like the silver lining approach. And my team had done that. Like they had actually delivered more in a smaller amount of time. But something in me was like holding it back to like reply to that email and say like, yeah, my team also did more velocity, so this pandemic thing seems to be like better. I was like, it cannot be. People are dying, and the world is changing, and what we might be seeing right now might be the tip of the iceberg, and it cannot be that we are like celebrating like what can be good about this pandemic. I'm definitely missing something. And so fast forward 2 years, most of those people who replied to that email were gone, like VP level. Most of the people who were actually in the workforce, like I mean, you must have heard about the Great American Resignation.
Yes.
Like so many people quit their jobs, changed jobs. So many people like decided that I don't want to do this anymore. Many people were forced to, like underprivileged, and even women, right? Like many, like disproportionately women had to drop out of the workforce. There were such big macro things that were happening in the world, and it were impacting the people at a macro level and at a very human level as well. Like it was no more like, by the time the Delta wave hit India, it was no more oh, I know somebody who knows somebody who has passed away. It was like, no, my friend who I drove a bicycle to school 8 years in a row, he passed away. It was like that. It was that real. And I think that entire phase, I would say, made me think, what am I missing in the human that is sitting in front of me right now? And that human wasn't even sitting in front of me, it was on Zoom. But like the question in my mind constantly was like, what am I missing? Earlier, having gone through like a little bit of like leadership in sports, business school, and having had done like, people management roles, there was a little bit of like confidence of like, oh, I'm a good people leader. Oh, I understand how management works. I think when the pandemic hit and we were like in like 1 year, 1.5 years into it, and things were really hard, I think it was all about like, I'm missing something about this person's story and journey and how this is impacting them. That is what I need to get to. And that is what I need to be comfortable with. Because guess what? Like, even if you don't ask, people are going to share. And as a people leader, sometimes you got to sit there and listen without judgment. You got to sit there and listen without having the need to fix it or having the need to like respond to it, and just absorb that hurt and pain. And it starts off as like absorbing, but then you cannot really absorb. Like if you have a big team and everybody's like seeing you as an empathetic leader, absorbing doesn't work. At after a point of time, you start breaking down. But you truly got to observe the hurt. Like I would say, it's like as an observer of like somebody's going through the journey, I'm going to give them a judgment free space where I'm going to observe it. I don't have to like take it away from them. I need to acknowledge it to them that I see you hurting. I see that you're going through this really horrible journey, and I am here to witness that. You don't, there is nothing else needed from you. Going back to like the personal side, like what it impacted me, like early on, I quickly realized that I had gotten into the absorption phase. I was trying to absorb, and it was spilling over into my personal life. And given the personal life was in the confines of a condo with a partner, it was impacting the person who you were living with the most. Because guess what? You were not going and playing cricket. You were not going and playing racquetball. You were not like going and hanging out at bars and spending time with different friends. You were you were with like one person, and that person got everything. And my wife, she's a physician, so yes, you're probably aware, like that was a horrible time for doctors.
Yes.
So her buffers were already full, and sometimes she did the same thing to me in terms of like, if she and she didn't have an option. Like she's a pediatrician, so when your child is sick, you are not the best human being. Like you
Correct.
are angry, you are frustrated, and the doctor in front of you gets all of that. And so she would go have it and witness that at like 18-hour 20-hour shifts, come back home. And if I had kind of been like, my buffers are full because I've been absorbing, it was just like catastrophic. And we went through that phase. It was really, really hard. It wasn't till later that like we like got to a point of like, hey, I need to be able to have some buffer left for you, which means that I need to be able to be there for my team as a leader. But at the same time, personally, I need to have very clear understanding of my boundaries, articulate those boundaries to myself first, my team later. Within those boundaries, give people the best that I can. But the moment those boundaries keep getting crossed, not stay silent, acknowledge that my boundary is getting crossed, my buffer is getting full, and try to do something different. And that something different was going from an absorber to an observer without judgment.
Nachiket, they say crisis brings in many, many lessons and many insights and discoveries. In many ways, at least the way I have looked at crises in my life, and I've had many, uh, it has taught me a lot. It has given a huge knock on my head as a wake-up call on some stupid things I used to be doing those days. But let me ask you, you just spoke about you and your wife, who is a pediatrician, living in a small confined space, locked in, during the pandemic days. Both of you struggling with your professional responsibilities, as they say, keeping the clock running. For you with your work, with your projects and teams that you were a part of, and she in the healthcare sector, keeping people healthy and hopeful, if I can use that phrase. What of the two of you, I am tempted to ask, that you ended up both discovering of yourself in those moments of crises in your professional life and roles, as well as the life that you were building together?
Yeah, I mean, and that's such a great question, Milind, because I think you are absolutely right. It was a crisis. We got married in 2019, and then in 2020 the pandemic hit. So it was
And
like first year after.
and sorry to interrupt, what I also know that she's a young American girl.
That is right. Yeah, she is. She is from Baltimore. She's American, born and brought up here, and so definitely intercultural. So yeah, like getting married. And by the way, we had three weddings. One in San Francisco, one in Portland, and the last one was in Goa. And then we were in honeymoon in Rajasthan. Came back and got locked down. So it was like this, like, oh, beautiful, big, extravagant year that we got, and then it was just like completely different. So it was like a day and night difference when the pandemic hit, and like how we saw each other, um, and it was a crisis mode. One thing I would say this, I think, like, one of the things I've realized is, like, she can really respond to hurt with empathy. I have a very finite potential of responding to hurt with something other than hurt, anger, or like grief, and that I can do a lot of that in my professional life, because you gotta protect a certain sort of like a professional image, and so you can like buffer a lot. But authentically speaking, right, like if somebody is hurting around you, somebody is sharing their hurt with you, what is the default reaction you have? My default reaction was a need to fix it. When I grew up, where I grew up, like, that's how people around me behaved. Like, if you got hurt, somebody was either invalidating it, like, oh, no, you're okay, fine, don't worry. Or they wanted to, like, oh, try Iodex, try this, try Chandu Balm, or like try Band-Aid. Like, it was like, how can I fix this? Because somebody you care about, somebody you love, they are hurting, and you are in that role of witnessing. It's really hard to not go into a role of wanting to fix it or wanting to like invalidate it, because that hurt is too much for you to take. So one of the things that I realized was her like superpower was she could actually respond to my hurt with empathy. And that empathy wasn't that I get what you're going through. That empathy wasn't like, oh, I've gone through something similar, and so now I understand. That empathy wasn't on the lines of like, giving me solutions to how I can fix a problem. That empathy mostly looked like, I believe your story. Like, what you're telling me, I believe you. And I have faith in you that you will get through this, and I'm here for you. So let me be a part of the journey, which I think was a very unique and a very distinct, skill that hadn't been exercised in many of my relationships, like both romantic or non-romantic, in the past. And we were forced to use that because, as I said earlier, there's a lot of hurt going around during that point of time from both sides. That made me respond in more kinder ways than I was used to, because I think she was actually going into the real world, getting exposed to things, working extra hours, being yelled at, being screamed at, coming home and sometimes breaking down. And I learned during that time that right now I just need to be there, and there's nothing I can do, nothing I can say, but I cannot not let her feel that I'm not witnessing her hurt.
Nachiket, you so beautifully spoke of empathy and understanding in a relationship with your partner. And here I'm alluding to not necessarily a partnership which is a man-woman partnership in marriage or otherwise. I'm even talking of same sex as well, because I'm a huge believer in gender diversity and respecting every gender identity that one has, both biologically as well as psychological. But coming back to this idea of empathy and understanding in a situation like yours, which is a cross-cultural interfaith marriage with a young son, and the responsibility of the two of you nurturing and caring for him. I feel that in addition to empathy and understanding in a situation like this, it does call for a certain process of reconciliation, if I can use that phrase.
Absolutely.
A sense of acceptance, which can only come with a sense of forgiveness.
Yes.
So I wonder, these are sounding big, but is this something which is playing out in the family of the three of you today?
Oh, that is absolutely right. I think I personally believe that forgiving and moving towards reconciliation, without that, I don't believe in today's world any relationship can last long. Forget about romantic relationships, it's any relationships. I think our world has so drastically changed, and the kind of stuff that we get exposed to and how it shapes our personality, our thought process. I mean, it's this, like the whole world is getting polarized. We are getting every country you look at, like there is a lot of like polarization. There's a civil discourse is something to be nostalgic about. Like it's not there the way it used to be.
Correct.
There's a lot of like blaming, finger pointing, and I think where I feel like forgiveness and reconciliation really come into play is like, yes, that will happen. It is not about not getting polarized. It is not about not getting yourself exposed to things, because guess what, like we are getting exposed to things no matter what you do. You can turn off your Twitter account, get off of Facebook. The world is filled with things with which will like make you think one way or the other, and most likely it will make you think in a way that is not the same thing that your next person next to you is thinking. And so forgiving and reconciliation, I feel super important in terms of like raising a kid in an interracial marriage. I mean, I think that is like the most important thing. Forgiving and being able to reconcile and get back onto the same page, because you have to keep a baby alive. So there's a clear goal there. Like, you kind of like tell yourself like you have to keep this baby alive and thriving. That's the most important thing. But if you permit me, Milind, I will take a few steps back. Like I think I would like to share this with you and your audience. I think so Beth and I got married 2019. We started trying 2020, and it was about like a year before we decided that things are not working out. We need to go and have IVF. And it was a long journey, and it is a very mentally stressful journey. And as I mentioned, it was during the pandemic, and you are locked in, and you are going through this like month over month, feeling like things are not working out. And just that journey, even with the baby not even being in the picture, acknowledging to yourself that we will have to go through IVF, and we'll have to think about adoption. And have we as a couple ever talked about those things? Because we both value being parents, we both wanted to be parents, but we never had. I don't know if you ever talk about this when you are dating and not really, married. You're like, oh, what if we can't have babies? Are we going to adopt? I don't know. We didn't. But here we are, finding ourselves wanting a child, not being able to conceive, having to go through IVF. And that entire journey in itself was a journey which kind of polarizes you in many different ways. Because what a woman's body has to go through to go through IVF It's so incredibly hard and so exhausting at so many levels, that like as the male partner, it's just like impossible to be empathetic. And I'm doing air quotes for empathetic here, is because you can truly never experience what she's going through. But I think you got to be there. And yes, she is the one taking the hormonal injections. And you can be like, yeah, I don't need to be there. Yeah, you don't need to be there. But we decided that every time she's taking that injection, I am sitting there and doing this like weird face of like clenching my jaws and my wrist, and kind of like going through that. Uh, not because like I'm somehow like experiencing her pain and her journey. No, but like I want her to know that I can see her going through that. Um, and I would say like the seeds were planted during that phase where Beth was going through something tremendous, like the IVF journey for a woman's body, and even for like her mind are like really, really intense. And as a male partner, like your job is very simple. You actually don't have to do much. You have to deposit some specimen, and then your job is done basically. But you can choose to be a part of that journey. And I would say like if I have to do it again, I would not do it differently. That's when the relationship, there was no like culture, there was no like American Indian, there was no like man woman, there was nothing like that coming into the way. It was two human beings who were both wanted to be parents, looking at this process as something that we are going through together, irrespective of the fact that one of us was doing the heavy lifting in terms of like what the body and the mind was going through.
But then there is this beautiful four-letter word called love, which gives immense energy to those who go through this process. And I guess the two of you are blessed to have this amazing energy between the two of you.
That is right. And I think the meaning of love kind of evolved for us. Like I think we knew what love was, and there was this like selfless uh like feeling of wanting to do right by the other person, but like going through this journey like really like qualified that word to like a different level. And then yeah, we were blessed with Sid, but we also had to go through a miscarriage in that journey.
Oh my
And
goodness.
going through that loss after after going through like so much, as I mentioned, IVF is really hard. And then the first cycle actually resulted in a miscarriage. And what miscarriage does to like you as a couple, you as a mother, you as a father, it's different. And I think that was a great time where it was not just the love for each other, but like the community around us. Really, like even though we were remote, and we were doing this in isolation, it felt really, really. I cannot tell you like the level of connection I felt with friends of mine who came up and told us like, hey, we've gone through a miscarriage too. And like sharing vulnerably that we've been through this and it has happened and it happens a lot, and we should talk about it, and we should be not shaming people for going through this. It's about like exactly during this time sharing with each other that, again, just because I went through a miscarriage doesn't make me experience your pain.
Yes.
But I by me sharing that with you, that hey, I this happened to us, and I'm here for you as you go through it. I think the power of that was immense. So the community and so many of our close friends who shared that, so many of our friends who hadn't had a miscarriage, but who were sort of like actually leaning in and being like, 3 years from now, 4 years from now, we don't know what happens, but we wanna be a part of this journey with you, and we want you to be a part of our journey as we go through this. So there was love that was growing more between Beth and I, but at the same time, there was this like community, despite being remote, with like people leaning in with vulnerability, kind of like making that love kind of even more qualified.
Yes, I guess the circle of love encompasses just about everybody, not just the two of you, but the
Agree.
community who are with you. But here is Siddharth, Sid, as you lovingly call your son. Is how old is he now?
He is 14 months now.
14 months. unknown to him, there must be some interesting, fun stuff that may also be happening as a part of his raising up, when you add the two grandparents to the potpourri.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and I think like that is a very different ball game. I think Beth and I had to like really clarify what we value. And we both we knew we wanted to be parents, but like what are the values? Like what do we want? What kind of a father do I want to be? What do I expect from my wife? What does she expect from me? Those were things that were in itself hard. And they were hard because of individual differences between Beth and I as individuals. They were hard because of individual differences that come because she's American and I'm Indian, and these two cultures look at raising up children very differently. But what about that proxy of like when we say like cultural difference, it's always a proxy to a human value, and a certain culture prioritizes certain human values above some other values. And so getting down to that human value, many times realize that we were quarreling about, or we were sort of arguing about something superficial. And then at the end of it, when you kind of peel the onion, what both she and I were striving for was that we want to create a household, we want to create a home where no matter if whatever Sid does in his life, he feels safe to come back to. So at the end of it, like the route that I might be taking, or the action that I might be doing, or the things I might be saying, underneath all of that, this insecurity that I don't want this baby to not feel that he can come back to me when something goes wrong, which will go wrong. And I think when I spoke to Beth, it was exactly the same thing. It's like, I don't really care what happens. Like if he goes, does something really horrible, he always knows that, mom and dad are there. There is a place called home to come back to, where there will be a judgment-free space, not a hurt-free space. We will be hurt by if he does bad things, but there will be a judgment-free space of acknowledging his journey. And that common value is what actually we are trying to like bring out. So as a couple, it was a journey, and let me be very, very, very clear, like that journey is still ongoing. We've had
I know, I'm
few
sure. I'm sure.
unlocks. We've got
But
few unlocks, but totally anticipate many, many more of those arguments and quarrels to clarify the core values.
Nachiket, you and I have been raised in an Indian family in India, where for reasons that are good as well. I'm not saying bad reasons, but there are good reasons as well, where uh, the nurture and care of a child is taken to the extreme, to the extent of creating a sense of dependency on the parents for just about every action in one's life, to the extent of even finding it difficult to make a choice without parents' approval, even when you are old enough to make those choices. Even in 2023 India, we have many families, in urban India as well, where not only when to marry, but when to have your first child is something which is a parents' consent, required kind of a thing. Now, good or bad, that's how it is. And then you have the other culture, which is the West or American or Europe, where empowerment happens very early in age. Taking ownership and responsibility of one's life through choices and consequences thereof is something which is imbibed very early in life. So I wonder, and I'm kind of reminded of this fun incidents in the life of a friend of ours, whose parents are in India, and thanks to the visa conditions, they can only visit their daughter once every year for not more than 6 months. And then she's married to an American boy who has parents living in some other parts of America. And they obviously come over the weekends in that sense. So I wonder, it's a little reverse drama than yours in terms of you and Beth, but I guess I wonder the process is the same.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think, and let me start by saying that I think every culture has great things about it. And we, who we claim to be from a certain culture, should ask ourselves, like, is this still relevant? And everybody should do that and acknowledge that everybody will have something good and something that probably is not bad. I will just say out of context or outdated. Here's a very concrete example. Beth told me very early on, in our journey as parents, she's like, my culture, Western culture, is really good about telling me what not to do. It's very, very clear, very, very prescriptive of like, don't do X, Y, Z. And she's like, your culture is really good about telling, please put red oil on your baby for massage them, and give them turmeric, and try this and try that. And she's like, I actually feel that's a really amazing thing. It's not just about like, don't do this or this will go wrong, which the Western world they have it nailed. Like, they know exactly what to give to the baby, what not to give to the baby. So there's a lot of like, don't do these things with your baby. And as you know, like in India, there is this like, grandmas will come and give you thousands of recommendations. And initially I used to be like, man, like this is too much. But she actually said like that she appreciates. She
Yes.
doesn't get that from her side of the family, and she actually appreciates that. I think the reason I share that story is because also it is important, like, we as the contemporary generation, the ball is also in our court to say like, yeah, historically Indian culture is very like overbearing and the parents don't let go of the control. But like, have I done the hard work to clarify my boundaries as an adult when I became an adult with my parents in a constructive manner? I had to do that in 2019 January, when my parents were visiting us for the first time, and Beth and I were already living together, and it was a 3-month visit. And she wasn't used to that, as you said earlier. Like, she was used to like people visiting over the weekend. She had agreed to this arrangement, but as the arrangement actually started, it became very clear that there were just like foundational core values that were getting stepped on. And it was a hard journey, like it was me having to, first of all, I'll be very honest, I got into the bridge mode. The bridge mode is getting stuck between two people with different opposing views and trying to connect them. Doesn't work. You end up hurting both of the people. I will advise people to stay away from it. But I did that. I tried to like, no, but she means that. No, but she means this. No, but this is the meaning of this in this country. And no, this is the meaning of that in that country. Doesn't really work. What I realized is like, what actually was happening is, if I try to take, for example, my parents' point of view and try to justify it to Beth, what she actually sees is like, I'm getting in a defensive mode about something that I want to like protect my parents from, rather than acknowledging that she is going through this hurt. It is not that she's saying what they're doing is wrong or what I'm doing is wrong, is acknowledging that her values are getting crossed. She's uncomfortable, and me as her partner should acknowledge those feelings, not try to fix them, but acknowledge those feelings. But because you get into that, like the ego is so strong with that mother-child relationship or a father-child relationship, is that sometimes you cannot help yourself from defending. Is like, oh, when my father said, like a man can make a house, but only a woman can make it a home, he wasn't being sexist. It was actually like, it's coming from a really good place of like, and it's like, no, it's not about that. It's not about that. It's not about like defending. It's not about like saying my father was now saying something wrong or Beth misunderstood it. It's about acknowledging that, yes, this statement in today's world can be construed by somebody like you in a certain way, and I acknowledge that hurt. And doesn't mean that I'm going to ask my father to change. I know where he is coming from. So I feel like the most important thing that really helped is like, I had to have serious conversations with both Beth and my parents about who I am, what my boundaries are, what my values are, and be able to like clarify them. And 2 years it took. kind of like get to that level where we could talk about those things. Like, for example, there is this thing called emotional volatility as a management tool. What it means is, rather than having a constructive conversation with you, I will be like giving you threats. Like, okay, if you do this, I will never talk to you again. Or if you do that, I'm going to bang my head on the wall. And this must be very familiar, right? Like growing up in India, these kind of tactics were used a lot. If like, threatening, or, oh, I will hurt myself if you do this, or, oh, you're not a good. And being able to be like, guys, like, I don't think that is the constructive conversation. I do not believe that you mean that you will really never see me again if this happens. So let's take that one step back and like really tell me like where the hurt is, and can we talk about how to constructively talk about it, as opposed to like, I'm never going to speak to you again. And so the boundary clarification, I would say, like, was a big journey, and it continues to be a journey. But I think it's all started, Milind, because you asked me about like forgiveness and reconciliation. If like, you have a son now who's an adult, and like you see him a certain way, he sees you a certain way. One day you guys are having a conversation which changes that mental image of who he is for you, or vice versa. That is a conversation of heart. That is a conversation of something being taken away from you, something being taken away from him. There is hurt, which is meaning that there is going to be a need for forgiveness, which means that there is going to be a need for reconciliation, for something new to happen. I think Desmond Tutu and Brene Brown both talk about forgiveness cannot truly happen without something dying and something new being born. And we talk about reconciliation as this romanticized idea of people coming together after something bad happening, but it is never the exact same thing that you come back to. You come back to something new, something has died, something has to be let go of. And acknowledging what that thing is that you are like willing to let go of within you and in a relationship, and having the vocabulary to talk to it with your partner, with your parents. I think that's been like a big learning experience through all of this.
I'm tempted to share something very personal over here. I haven't spoken about it to rather anybody other than Asha, my wife, and probably another one person at the most. But you've kind of evoked me into putting it out there today to the world through this podcast. A very personal experience of mine when Rahul, my son, at 21, he moved to the US to do his master's at Stanford. And, for the last 7 years now, he continues to live there. He's having a good life for himself. And he's our only child. And we have been a nuclear family. So for much of 21 years of our son's life, he was the center of universe for me.
Yep.
As it would happen to any father anywhere in the world. And it's the case with Asha, the mother too. But first 3-4 years of his leaving the nest, trying to discover his own wings and becoming the man that he has become today, the house was empty for me. Not physically, emotionally. And this was a hurt. This was a pain that I carried for a long, long time. And then, of course, when, he graduated in 2018, and then we have been visiting him often and on. He comes home very often to India. There was this conversation where, in a very subtle manner, I actually shared this pain with him, to the extent of saying that, I miss you. I miss you a lot, much beyond what the words mean. And instinctively, he said something which actually amplified that hurt zillion times over, but actually became liberating for me in many ways. Now, let me explain what he said. When I said to him that, son, I miss you a lot, his instinctive reaction was, Dad, you need to find another center of your universe. Instinctively, for me, it meant that I'm gone from your world.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me days and weeks to kind of live through that agony, saying that my son is saying, okay, I'm gone. I'm flown out. But it was only later that I realized what he was trying to say is, in life, one can discover, as you live and move forward, different centers of your universe.
Yes.
So you said a little while ago about the process of forgiveness necessitating the acknowledgement that something is dying, but at the same time, something new is getting born.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, the father identity had kind of engulfed me so much that I was blind to many other possible identities that I could possibly have. And with each identity comes with a sense of purpose and passion.
Yep.
So yes, it was
That's
it
a
was
beautiful
it was a
story.
huge moment for me, and it has liberated me in many ways to say that I am this, that, and much more in terms of identity and purpose. And I'm eternally grateful to my son for helping me with this insight. And I would love to pick your thoughts on that as we kind of come to the end of this conversation.
Yeah, and I think first of all, like, thank you so much for sharing. Like, and I think what a great example of, you leading with courage. I think, literally, you when you say to your son, like, hey, I miss you, I love you are exposing yourself to a world of hurt. Because as you said, like what he says might make your pain like a zillion times harder. And so I think just amazing. I think for people listening, and it's I think like more fathers need to do what you did for your kid, and maybe it was painful for a while, but I'm pretty sure like both your lives are better for your honesty and your vulnerability. And also thank you for sharing that with me and with your audience. I think that's a very, very inspiring story. And I'm sure it's applicable to like different walks of life when we talk about like identity and letting go.
So, what has also led me, this experience has led me to say that identity and purpose are constantly evolving. And if one is open to this idea, will live a life of hope and positivity, which gives us enough and more power to create things which were previously not thought of. So, for example, this very Wings podcast that we are doing, we did 75 episodes in the first 3 seasons, and this is the 4th season that we are into. Hopefully 25 episodes, that's the goal, to take it to 100 for whatever reasons. But to be able to discover stories of young Indians wherever they are in their world, doing whatever they are doing, like you, and curating those stories through a podcast conversation and making it available to the world at large is a new purpose that Asha and I have discovered for ourselves, as a part of acknowledging that identity and purpose is not something which is etched in stone and frozen in time.
That is so beautifully said. And Milind, I think I know I'll come to your question. I do want to share this with you, your audience here. Like the impact that you have had on me and my life is just like, it's like phenomenal. So we were trying to attempt to break a Guinness World Record in our final year of engineering, and we did it. That was the first time in the history of COEP that somebody was trying to do a Guinness World Record. And there is a whole story about the Guinness World Record, and that can be its own podcast. but something about like the way you had structured the mentorship program, and people like Pramod, people like Venki who are mentoring us, and people like you and Asha who were like coaching us through this journey. And I remember you had also introduced us to like one of your journalist friends. I think his name was Vijay, if I'm remembering right. The reason I'm sharing this, COIP has since created 4 more Guinness World Records. I think 150th year of the college, we did the first Guinness World Record, and it would have lived and died. But what you just spoke about purpose, the way you kind of launched the mentorship program and provided structure and showed very young minds like ours the value of structure and process and commitment and following through on those commitments. Those were some of the seeds that we planted as we did the Guinness World Record, and giving the college a process to think about beyond Gymkhana, beyond Boat Club, beyond Firodia, that there can be this one thing, and if you nurture it, it can actually unlock. So since then, I think we have left college, and the people who saw us physically in college have left college in 2010. So we are 13 years from the last time somebody who was physically in the Guinness World Record or saw us physically in college has been in that college. And that college still continues to do that Guinness World Record thing more than anybody else. And that is because of that legacy, that process. And I have to tell you this, like that is because of the way the Wings mentorship program actually taught us to think. I know it was completely besides the question that you asked me, but I wanted to share that with you as like a personal thing.
Thank you so much. Nachiket, a conversation with you only has a start time. That's my experience. It never has an end time, but we are in a podcast format. We need to bring this conversation to a close. So I've enjoyed every bit of the time we have spent today. Just want to quickly invite you to share, how has this conversation been for you?
Milind, this has been amazing. As I mentioned, right, like, just, speaking with you and, the way you have vulnerably shared your life journey as not just like, I am the one sharing mine, has been extremely rewarding. It's a gift you have given me. And I'm like genuinely appreciative of it. I think I do wanna say a couple of things. There are 3 things in my life that I feel like I know for sure are true, and I want to leave us with that, if you're okay with it.
Sure.
All right. I feel like a very important thing that I have come to realize is that happiness and sadness, they are always there for you. If the happiness is having dinner with you, the sadness is sleeping in your bed, and vice versa. And acknowledging that, like when you're happy, that sadness might be right around the corner, and when you're sad, happiness is probably just around the corner as well. I think that has been like a really, really important thing that I truly believe is true, based on the life that I have lived. The other thing I really believe is like what we put in the world eventually comes back to us. And I think the story I was sharing about what you did for us, and what it actually did to the, like, literally hundreds of thousands of people, like when you started that Wings mentorship program. And I believe that there is like an accounting, there is karma is real. And I have experienced several times in my life of like, you hang on to something when you do something in the outside world, and that internal buffer is the one that brings it back somehow. If there's like actual science to it, I don't know what it is, but I do believe that.
So Nachiket, let's have a deal as we are talking. Next time you are in India, you visit us in Pune, and likewise, whenever we are in Oregon next, we will find our way to your home in Portland for a meal or a drink together.
That sounds amazing. Sounds great.
You take care. Goodbye. Thank you for your time today, my dear listeners. This is your host, Milind Agnihotri, signing off. Goodbye, take care, and stay safe. This podcast is for general information purposes only and should not be considered as a piece of any professional advice. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of its guest. Creators of this podcast expressly disclaim any and all liability or responsibility for any direct or indirect, consequential or other damages arising out of any individual's use of this podcast. For feedback and suggestions, please write to wingsindia75@gmail.com. Thank you.